Kia ora tolofalava and warm Pacific greetings to you all. My name is TJ and today I wanted to make a tutorial on the FSM system or finite state machine system within the EFPSE editor engine. This tutorial was like overdue, so I thought I'd just put it out there. It's going to be a little bit scattered just because I don't really necessarily have a plan for this tutorial, but essentially I'm going to be breaking down how I created my little AK-47 here. So, I'll be creating the state machine for this weapon here, or breaking it down I should say. How it shoots, how it reload, and got that custom reload animation, and yeah. So where to begin? FSM or finite state machine. What is a finite state machine? Well, a finite state machine, from my understanding, is a programming pattern where it lets you, define states that an entity can have in order for you to be able to change its behavior. So let's say it was an enemy and he has an idle state. That would be his just normal state, like default state when nothing is happening. If he sees the player, then he'll go into a C state, and when that jump from the idle state to the C state changes the behavior in the sense that I can have him do different things when he's in that state. And then if he's close enough to the player, I'll let him jump to his attack state. And then once he's in the attack state, obviously there'll be another set of behaviors, whether it be attacking or multiple attacks, or maybe even he heals. It really just depends on what you're wanting to do with your game. But yeah, I guess when it comes to a finite state machine, it makes it a lot more flexible for you to be able to have a lot more interesting, when it comes to enemies AI, but specifically when it comes to the weapons, it can have different behaviors and properties for the weapons as well. But in this case, with our engine, EFPSE editor, I want to use the finite state machine to extend my animation frame. So I want to make sure I can have a lot more flexibility with how many frames I can use, even though it's kind of it's quite restrictive when it comes just to the default. Like if I go into here and import sprites, I only have one for idle, and I have 6, I believe, 1 2 3 4 5 6, yes, for attack. And if I wanted to extend those, because my animation might be a little bit more complex, this is where finite state machines come into play, specifically with this engine, in order for you to be able to do a lot more things in that sense. So how do I create a finite state machine? Well, a program you will need is actually, I'm pretty sure majority of the at least for Windows, they all have a notepad application. So you can use that to write the code in order for you to be able to do this finite state machine method. But in my case, I'm using Notepad++, which is a free piece of software you can also download if you'd like to use it. I feel like it's just a lot more, there's a lot more options for you to be able to do things. That was very terrible of an explanation. I'm not selling it well, but all I can say is it's very helpful, specifically when it comes to coding stuff. So this right here is the example of the AK that I've made. As you can see here, it starts off with a image line and then a space. Spaces are very important when it comes to writing code. AK and then space 0, space again 18. Now, what does this mean? Well, image points to the images I want to use for my AK, so the animation frames. And where are these located? Well, if we go to where my game is located here, which is projects underground, if we go here, it should be in my sprites folder, and in the sprites folder it should be in my weapons folder. And if you can see here, these are all the frames for my AK. So we got AK 0, 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 8 9 10, so on and so forth. So when I am using this image tagline, what I am doing is asking, the engine to locate an image, that image being called AK, and 0 to 18 means how many frames there are that I am looking for. So from 0 to 18 means I have 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, all the way up until 18 right here. And those are all the frames I want to use when it comes to this finite state machine. So yeah, and as you can see here, it's got AK right here, but all of my images have numbers on them. So that is naming convention you should understand when naming your sprites when putting them in a particular folder. So I have AK. I made it quite simple so it's easy for me to type and write. And yeah, it'll be off from 0 to 18. The first frame, or AK0, should always be your pickup frame, or how I say, like the sprite you want to use for the pickup of your weapon, because the engine always will interpret 0 as, oh, this is the frame in which you're using in order for this image to be the pickup icon for your weapon that you have chosen. So yeah, and then here I have sound AK fired and sound AK reload, and this is pretty much loading in the sounds I want to use when I am using when I'm going to put them into my for use in my weapon. So where are these located? Well, if we go back into, I guess, my directory with all my things for this particular project, you'll see that there is a sounds folder, and if I click on there, right here is where my AK reload and my AK fired sounds are located. The reason why I have to put them in here is because, from my understanding, when you use finite state machines, if I were to, like, let's say we go into the engine here, go to weapons, and I was to import the sounds here, they will not be used. So it's best practice to load them up in here and make sure they're used within the state machine. And so yeah, this first part will be pretty much loading in kind of like the assets you're wanting to use when it comes to this particular what's it called, finite state machine. Now let's say I just wrote those first, and then I'm going to be saving this document. Where would I save this? Well, let's say I go file and then I go save as, and it's already loaded it in here for me just because I've already saved it myself. But if I go to my projects folder for this particular project, Underground, there should be a folder named states. And if I go onto that states folder, this is where I want to save the finite state machine for this particular weapon. And so as you can see here, it's called ak.states, and states is the key word you need to use for this to actually be read as a state machine when it comes to the engine. So make sure you always name it .states, and the name itself should be the same name as what the weapon is called in engine. So if I was to go into engine and go weapons settings here, as you can see here, my first weapon is AK and the name is AK. So that'll point the engine to obviously the weapon, obviously what you're wanting the finite state machines to affect, which is the weapon, and that will essentially be the finite state machine for that weapon. So if I go states here, we got AK states. Disregard these are some states for my enemies in that, but I'm just explaining in particular with weapons. So yeah, it's saved right here in my states folder in my project directory, which is cool. So how do I know like what all these are? Well, there is kind of like a scripting API that what's it called, Easy FPS has, and for you to be able to understand or know what these like I guess the terminology you need to use when it comes to coding. If I go back to the engine and I click on this question mark and go to the manual here, it will open up a tab with all, I guess, the instruction manual for the engine. And if I head all the way to this tab right here, which is called FSM, this is the finite state machine one, it'll kind of break down how to create one yourself. And I'm essentially just explaining what this is just in my own way using a practical example. And yeah, if you go through these, you'll notice that it explains in detail what all of the, I guess, in this case it says actions or like functions or like, yeah, a lot of the things you'll be able to do when it comes to using the finite state machine, which is pretty awesome. But yeah, so I would say keep this open, just so you have something to reference. But let's just go back to my finite state machine and we'll go through what mine essentially is. So first state is my state idle none 0, and this is pretty much saying what state this is, which is the idle state, and every weapon I believe should always have an idle state. And then the next one, when it says none here, essentially what I'm doing is defining what state this should jump to once the state is finished. So since it's idle, it doesn't need to jump to anything, so it goes to none or no state. And then 0, let me refresh my memory, what would this be? 0, that it sets if you want this state to interpolate model frames. So this value here is with regards to 3D models if you're using those. I don't necessarily play around with that, I'm just not comfortable personally. I just like using sprites, it's a lot more easier. But yeah, so I don't think you need to focus on that for this particular tutorial, but yeah, just know that that's there if you need it. And yeah, so that is what the first state line is when it comes to a lot of the states you define. And then the next one is frame space 1 and then space 0.9, then 000, and then none. Man, that's like a lot of I know you guys are probably looking at this and like, what do all these numbers mean? Wow. So frame essentially is what frame I want to use when it comes to the beginning of the this state. What frame of animation do I want to use? So I'm using my first frame because if we remember, when I go back to my game, my project, sorry, and we go to the sprites we're using, 1 will be my first frame, and that's my idle frame because I'm essentially doing nothing here. So that's why you want to use frame 1 for this particular deal. And then this value is quite important because it's going to be how long the duration of the frame. So how long do you want it to be on screen in terms of seconds? And I've made it 0.9. You can set this at any value you'd like. I just thought 0.9 just worked for me, so that's like 0.9 seconds. And then 0, 0, 0, none. So these, I believe, define the position in which it should be moving, both X, Y, and Z. Let me just confirm just to be sure though. So if we go to 0, 0, 0, offset coordinates, yeah. So it will be the offset coordinates of your weapon sprite in there. So if it's a sprite, I guess that's not Z, that might be like scale. So X, Y, and then scale. You can confirm. I don't necessarily need to use a lot of these offsets, only because with the animation frames I use, I do all of the positioning and the animation itself, just so it alleviates a lot of those problems for myself. And then none here. So what this pretty much defines is what action you want to perform on this frame. And you don't necessarily need to perform an action at all. None pretty much just means you play this frame for that amount of time, and at the end of it, or while it's being performed, nothing happens. So one tip I should say when it comes to this is you should make sure that your first frame is none, because for some reason in the engine it bugs out if you're wanting to perform an action straight away on your first frame when it comes to a lot of the states. So I would say whatever animation you play, you can play it, but try not to execute any actions on the first frame. Always try and do it on the second frame, and these happen quite quickly, so you won't really notice a difference in terms of input delay or anything, depending on the duration you define. So yeah, that's something you should know. And then as you can see here, the next one will pretty much just be the exact same, but I'm just defining different properties for the next frame I want to make. So I don't know if you guys can kind of see now through that explanation, but it's pretty much walking frame by frame what you're wanting to do, what you're wanting this I guess weapon to do, or if it was an enemy, like this entity, how do you want it to behave frame by frame, and you can define those. And yeah, this is why it's quite powerful, because as you can see, since there is no limit to the amount of frames I can use or the amount of actions I can perform, this is quite powerful, and I guess making a lot of versatility for your game, a lot of different things you'll be able to perform. Just, yeah, this just kind of opens it up a lot more, which is quite cool. But yeah, when I go into my second frame, I pretty much just go, yep, play the second frame, play it for 0.05 seconds. So I think that's just half of a second, or even less than that, I don't know. Yeah, no offsets, and then sound and attack, and then 0. Now, what am I doing here? Wow, sound and attack. So there is an action called attack where it just performs the attack of your weapon. But the reason why I'm using sound and attack is because, as you can see here, I've loaded those sounds for me to be able to use. And when I use sound and attack, it performs both attacking and playing a sound at the same time. And 0, this number pretty much defines what sound I want to play, because these will be in an index now. And since code runs from top to bottom, this being defined as a sound will be the first sound. But when it comes to coding, the first one always starts at 0, and then from 0 it just carries on from there. So this pretty much AK fired sound will be 0, and then sound AK reload will be 1, because we don't go from 1 2 3 4, we go 0 1 2 3 4. Yeah, so that's what pretty much this action is. If you want to kind of get a better explanation on how I'm using or what it even does, if we go back to the FSM, we can see all the actions that weapons, decorations, and enemies can do together, but then all the actions for the ones I'm using is right here in weapons only. And where is it? Oh, no, I'm using this one, my bad. But yeah, sound and attack, and then value does attack and plays sound in one action, and that value is pretty much just the number of the sound you want to play with regards to which ones you've loaded. So yeah, there's that. And then on the next frame, I use muzzle flash, which is another new action that I've put in. And what does this do? Well, if we reference the manual here, as you can see, muzzle flash and weapons only, this action shows muzzle flash, and what that is just it shows a burst of light when you are shooting. And so yeah, and then once I head to the end, frame 4 0.05, and then I set ready. And what ready does is readies up my weapon to be able to attack again. If I don't ready this up, then I can't attack. But what's interesting about this is, as you can see here in my attack state, instead of it going from none like in my idle, I go straight to my idle frame. So once this animation is finished, it'll go to, or like state is finished, it'll transfer to my idle state. And as you can see here, the action in my idle state is ready. So I will always be ready to fire again once I go back. This whole thing plays and goes back to the idle state, but I just put it there just for good measure, you know, good practice, or just in case something glitches out. But yeah, and then let's go into my reload state. Now it goes from reload to idle, and it's pretty much doing the exact same thing I have already explained, but here it starts at frame 5, because my 5th frame here is the start of my reload animation, and then it plays through. And yeah, I'm playing that, and I start my sound here because I've queued up, or I should say I've created my sound to I guess fit my animation frames, and that's why they're particular timings. But that was just sound design on my end. You can split up your sounds and separate them, load them differently in the index that you create, but I just wanted one sound, that's why I put it here. So that sound action will just play that sound on that frame, and it'll keep playing depending on how long it is. And that's why I only have to play it once, and the animation just plays through. And then this action here is reload, and that'll reload and calculate the weapon differentiation and ammo, depending on the like, because the game, that's already built into the game, that just caused that action in order for you to be able to reload. And even though it says it's reloaded here, that is an action, so it's an action part of the state, but the state still needs to run every single frame. So even though it reloads earlier, it still has to go through this whole entire animation before jumping back to the idle state. And yeah, so that's kind of how the inner machinations of my AK-47 finite state machine works. It's very simple when it comes to easy FPS editor. It's real cool that it's got like amazing system for you to be able to edit behaviors for weapons, entities, and directions, and weapons, entities, and decorations. And yeah, I just wanted to make this quick tutorial just as sort of like a explainer kind of what finite state machines are with regards to this system and in general. And yeah, hopefully this helped you guys. Yeah, make sure you join the Discord, because there is a dedicated set of developers there that would be glad to help. But also there's a very cool manual that we just opened up that you can read, and there's also an amazing unofficial manual created by PixelWolf. He is an amazing developer and he contributes heavily to this community, so please give that a look. And yeah, don't be a stranger. But thank you guys, and hopefully catch you guys in the next one.